Hi, I'm Krisha.
And I'm David.
Today we're going to be presenting our Labview extra credit soda dispensing project. So for this project, we had two parts. We had a part A and a part B. For part A, we were only dispensing Coke, and it was dispensing automatically once the required amount of money was entered. For part B, we're dispensing Coke and Fanta, but neither would be dispensed unless a button was pressed indicating they want to buy Coke or Fanta. So I'm going to start off by presenting part A, and then for part B, we're going to hand it over to David. So for part A, we're going to start on our front panel. We have four Boolean inputs. We have nickel, dime, quarter, and return change. And then we have three numeric indicators and one string indicator. So we have change returned, extra change, and current change for numerics and dispensing for our string. So moving on to our block diagram, we first put down a while loop, and this while loop has three shift registers. We have a unum shift register, a numeric shift register, and a Boolean shift register. And the unum was initialized to start, numeric was initialized to 0, and our Boolean was initialized to false. Since we are initialized to start, we're going to start with our start case for our case structure. So starting at the start, we can see that our unum is being changed to wait, while our numeric and our Boolean indicator, our Boolean shift registers are not changing. So you can also see that for our shift for our numeric shift register, it is connected to our numeric indicator current change, and our Boolean is connected to our stop button for a while loop. So this bottom shift register is controlling when the while loop should turn off. So moving on to wait, we have we have entered a event structure. In the event structure, we have five events. We have a timeout, quarter, dime, nickel, and return change. So starting with timeout, the unum changes the weight while the numeric and Boolean shift registers do not change. And this will just keep it running in the wait section until we get an input from any of our buttons. So moving on to quarter, we have our numeric and our Boolean shift registers not changing, and our unum shift register changing to add quarter. This same process applies to events 1 through 4. They just go to their respective unum. So for dime, it was add dime. For nickel, it was add nickel. And for return change, it went to return change. So now we're going to go to the case structure quarter. In our quarter case structure, we have our we have our numeric shift register entering and being in 0.25 is being added, and then we have an output. That output is our output shift register, but it's also being entered into a comparison block, and the comparison block is a greater than or equal to, and we're seeing if it matches the price of the soda. And if it does, and if that's true, it'll go to the state dispense, and if it's false, it goes back to the state wait. So moving on to our state dispense, we have we have our Boolean and numeric shift registers unchanged. Um, our our unum shift register goes to return extra change, and then we have our dispensing indicator that is connected to a string constant that says Coke has been dispensed. So now we are moving on to our return extra change. For this, we use the numeric shift register to subtract by the cost of the soda to get an output for an extra change, and that is connected to our numeric indicator extra change. Our Boolean remains unchanged, and our unum it gets changed to finish. So now we're going to investigate the finish case. For finish, the unum in the numeric shift registers do not change, but now we're going to exit out of our while loop and turn our Boolean shift register to true. So now the only case that has not been looked at is our return change, which occurs when the return change Boolean button is hit from the front panel. Here, our unum shift register changes to wait. Our numeric shift register changes to 0, and the the input shift register gets connected to our change returned numerical indicator. And then our Boolean shift register does not change. So now we're going to move on to an example with part A. Starting with the front panel, we're going to do a quarter in 3 dimes. And as you can see, our Coke has been dispensed and our extra change has been given to us. So now running it again, we're going to add in a nickel and a dime and then return the change. And as you can see, our 50 cents have been returned. Well, that should be it for the explanation of part A of the extra credit. Now it's time for David to explain part B.
Okay, with part A out of the way, I'll look over part B quickly. So we'll start out here the same way we did with the first part. Look over the front panel first. And so, as Krisha explained, this is very similar code, only the drinks are only dispensed when the button is pressed. And we have 2 options here for Coke and for Fanta at their respective price points. So the rest of the front panel remains pretty much the same. We have our Boolean controls for adding a quarter, dime, nickel, and returning the change, our current change, our dispense message, our change returned when you press the return change button, and then the extra change if you put in more than the cost. Once you select your drink, you'll get any excess back here. So moving over to the block diagram, a large portion of this remains the same with some slight modifications. We did remove a few of the cases here, a few of these states because they were not needed for this portion of the project. And we also changed some of the logic here for the adding each of the different values. We just removed the automatic dispensing logic here. And now that is handled over here on this side. So, but the rest of this remains more or less unchanged. You have your wait state, your add quarter, dime, nickel that corresponds to the given states. So I'll focus in more on the parts that did change, which is primarily over here on the right. We are feeding the current change value, which is this numerical, and we're feeding it to our shift register over here, but then we're also branching off to a couple different locations. The first of which is this event structure, that this is where the bulk of the work is being done. And we have 3 events. We have our timeout event, which really has nothing going on there. It's just an idle state. And then Coke and Fanta. So Coke and Fanta, they're basically the same. The only thing that changes is the cost here. Fanta cost 55 cents, while Coke cost 50. So we will look at the Fanta event for this one. So this event is triggered by a value change in the Fanta Boolean control, which is our button on the front panel. It's also seen here, but whenever that button is pressed, this event will be executed. And so this event takes the current value, numerical value of the change entered, and it first compares it against the cost, which is right here. And then that outputs a Boolean true or false that's used in three different locations. The other part of this numerical side is fed down, and the cost is subtracted from it. And that is fed to a selector here. And this is used for our return change, our extra change returned. So we'll just step down through each of these Boolean rungs here and show what they do. So the first one is fed to it's the control for a selector, and that selector is tied to strings, two string constants. For the true case, it will pass this Fanta has been dispensed message, which is passed through and displayed on our front panel on the dispense string indicator. And then while this is false, we'll just pass a blank string, which just leaves the display blank there. Moving down one here, we have this Boolean tied to our stop conditions. And this is essentially, while it's false, the while loop continues to run. Whenever it turns true, it will stop the execution. The final rung here is tied to the selector that is going to pass the numerical value minus the cost, and then it's going to pass that through to the extra change. So if you have anything over the cost, it'll be displayed there on the front panel. The other change we have is up here at the top. We are taking the current numerical value, and we have two sections here. This top one is for the Coke, and this bottom one is for the Fanta. And essentially all this is doing is it is comparing the current amount of change that's been entered against the cost. And if it's greater than or equal to, a Boolean indicator will uh, turn true and light up green on the front panel. And this is just to show that you've entered sufficient change to purchase your respective drink. So we'll give a quick demonstration here. So these are the two Boolean indicators that will light up green whenever you've entered enough change. So we can test that by adding 2 quarters. Our Coke indicator goes green because we have 50 cents. And if we add one more nickel, our Fanta indicator should turn green. Okay, so now we have entered enough change to buy either drink, and we're going to go with Fanta. So since we entered the exact amount of change, we get no change back. But if we run that again and we do 55 cents and buy the Coke, we'll get 5 cents back because the Coke only cost 50. So we can also do the return change. So say we put in a dollar 25 and we want to return that back to us, we can click this return change button and that will be here. I believe that covers our demonstration for part B. Thank you for watching.